exploring the relationship between overgeneralized autobiographical memory, impaired social problem solving, and stress generation. Emma has been working with Dr. Lisa Starr. Take it away, Emma.
Okay. So stress generation refers to the tendency of individuals with depression to experience more dependent life events than individuals without depression. So what dependent events refer to are events that are in some way generated by an individual's personal characteristics or pattern of behavior. So for example, arguments with a friend or a family member, or doing poorly on a test. In contrast, independent events refer to events that are not generated in any way by the individual. So for example, a friend moving away or experiencing a natural disaster. So prior research has found evidence of a reciprocal relationship between depression and stress generation, such that experiencing more frequent dependent life events contributes to the worsening of depressive symptoms over time. Thus, the stress generation hypothesis suggests that individuals with depression, due to the characteristics and behaviors associated with the disorder, generate more dependent events in their lives, which in turn lead to a worsening of their depressive symptoms and further dependent stress. Some studies have proposed possible mechanisms by which various cognitive and interpersonal factors, such as hopelessness, self-criticism, excessive reassurance seeking, may contribute to stress generation, but the precise way in which stress generation arises has not been established, and there are other contributing factors that remain unexplored. So one such possible contributor is overgeneralized autobiographical memory, or OGM. OGM refers to a tendency to provide non-specific memories in response to prompts for memories of specific events that have happened in one's life. And this phenomenon has been previously associated with depression. In the OGM literature, a specific event refers to an event that lasts less than one day and takes place at a particular time and location. The ability to recall specific memories is thought to be critical for problem solving, as the generation of potential solutions to problems may require accessing memories of problems that the individual has encountered previously and how they effectively or ineffectively resolved these problems. In line with this, OGM has been linked to a deficit in social problem solving ability. It seems reasonable to expect that less effective social problem solving abilities may make an individual more likely to experience dependent events. And a prior study did find that social problem solving skill deficits are associated with the experience of more dependent interpersonal stress. Thus, the main focus of this project was to explore the relationships between OGM, stress generation, and social problem solving. As a secondary focus, this project sought to explore the relationship between OGM and another depressive symptom that is related to poorer interpersonal outcomes, excessive reassurance seeking. So excessive reassurance seeking refers to a pattern of behavior in depression in which an individual repeatedly seeks reassurance that they have worth and are loved. Although excessive reassurance seeking was originally described as being rooted in doubt that reassurance from others is genuine, and a belief that the reassurance comes from pity or obligation instead, an alternative explanation is that excessive reassurance seeking arises from a lack of ability to access specific instances where accurate and relevant reassurance was provided. Okay. So to go through the aims of the study, the primary aim of the study was to establish a direct relationship between OGM and stress generation, in which OGM predicts stress generation at a 1-month follow-up. So more or less memory specificity, predicting an increase or a higher frequency in dependent life events reported. The study also sought to explore whether social problem-solving ability mediated the relationship between OGM and stress generation. And lastly, this study aimed to establish a direct relationship between OGM and excessive reassurance seeking, in which OGM is correlated with more reassurance seeking behavior. Okay. A total of 173 undergraduate students completed the tasks and questionnaires for this project, as well as an unrelated research project, the honors research project of Hannah Duttweiler. So 6 participants were excluded for not listening to directions on the OGM task, which will be explained momentarily, resulting in a final sample of 167 undergraduate students. Participants were predominantly female, and almost 50% of participants identified as Asian or Pacific Islander. 10 participants did not submit follow-up responses, so there was a resulting N of 157 for our longitudinal analyses. This study consisted of an initial 1-hour baseline visit and an online follow-up to be completed 1 month after that initial baseline visit. So going over the task used to measure OGM, the minimal instructions version of the autobiographical memory test, which has been used in a lot of the research on OGM in the past, was used. In this task, participants were asked to provide a memory of an event in their life in response to 10 different keywords, 5 positive and 5 negative. Participants were instructed that the memory must be at least 1 week old and should not be repeated for multiple keywords. Participants who gave more than 3 memories that were less than 1 week old were excluded from analyses, so that was the reason for those 6 participants being excluded. And that is because it is significantly easier to recall specific events from the past 7 days as opposed to recalling older events. So their results would have skewed the data. Responses to each keyword were rated for their memory content, response time, repetition, and memory age before receiving a final code of either a specific memory or an overgeneral memory. Responses were only considered specific memories if it met all of the listed criteria on the slide. So the event must have lasted less than a day, occurred at a particular time and place, occurred at least 1 week prior to the baseline lab visit, was not a repeat of a previous response, and the response had to be initiated within 30 seconds of the keyword presentation. The total number of specific memories was reported, was used as an index of memory specificity. So all other variables were assessed using self-report measures, which are listed here. All of these surveys were administered at baseline, and then the ALEQR in the quiz, which were used to assess the frequency of negative life events or stress generation, and then depressive symptom severity, were re-administered at the 1-month follow-up. Okay, so here are the bivariate correlations among all of the variables in the study. Inconsistent with prior research and our hypotheses, memory specificity was not significantly correlated with social problem-solving ability, the reported frequency of dependent life events at follow-up, the reported frequency of independent life events at follow-up, or reassurance-seeking behavior. These findings suggest that there is no direct link between OGM and either stress generation or excessive reassurance seeking in this sample. A finding that was consistent with expectations, social problem solving was significantly correlated with stress generation, such that a deficit in social problem solving ability was associated with a higher reported frequency of dependent life events at the 1-month follow-up. Additionally, social problem solving, the reported frequencies of negative life events at both baseline and follow-up, and reassurance seeking were all correlated significantly with baseline depression severity in the expected directions, such that more severe depression was associated with poorer social problem solving ability, a higher frequency of negative life events, and more reassurance seeking behavior. And this is important because when looking at the longitudinal analyses, the variables that we are investigating need to be able to account for variance above the already existing relationship between variables with depressive symptom severity. So in longitudinal analyses, OGM did not significantly predict stress generation. So building on the correlational analyses, this further suggests that there is not a direct link between OGM and stress generation present in this sample. When only controlling for the reported frequency of the respective event type at baseline, social problem-solving ability did significantly predict the reported frequency of both dependent and independent events at follow-up. However, the relationship did not remain significant after also controlling for depressive symptom severity at baseline, suggesting that the relationship between social problem-solving ability and stress generation does not exist independently of the association between depressive symptoms and stress generation. Given that OGM was not significantly correlated with social problem-solving ability, our proposed mediator, or stress generation, our proposed outcome variable, we declined to test the proposed mediation model in the second aim of our study. So there are several limitations to the study that must be acknowledged. First, the study utilized a non-clinical sample. Although previous research has found a link between overgeneralized autobiographical memory and depression in non-clinical college student samples, recent research has found that this link is present in individuals only at high risk for psychopathology. Therefore, it is possible that this population was low risk and too high functioning to observe the proposed hypotheses, and future research in clinical samples is needed to establish whether there may actually be a direct link between OGM and stress generation. Additionally, a significant proportion, about 50% of the current sample, self-identified as Asian or Pacific Islander. This is a pretty significant departure from a lot of the sample demographics seen in the literature. And so it's possible that either the processes of memory recall were different for people from different cultural backgrounds, or perhaps the interpretation of the instructions on the minimal instructions AMT were different enough that there was some unexpected variance in the results. In our surveys, methodologically, the instructional timeframe of the ALEQR, which was administered to measure the frequency of negative life events, when administered at that time to follow-up, was left at 6 months as opposed to 1 month. So what this meant was during our analyses, all of the analyses had to use the reported frequencies of negative life events at baseline as a covariate because that T2 data was not only collecting information on the events that occurred within the actual 1 month between baseline and the follow-up. All of the variables, like I mentioned previously, aside from overgeneralized autobiographical memory, were assessed with self-report scales only, so there is a potential for bias there, given what participants may or may not have been willing to share or could recall or had insight about themselves. And lastly, 17% of participants submitted their follow-up responses after the announcement of the university's COVID-19 shutdown. While these unique circumstances likely caused an abrupt change in participants' daily lives, these participants did not significantly differ from the others on reported frequency of negative life events or depressive symptom severity at their 1 month follow-up, which was analyzed using t-tests. So in summary, the findings were inconsistent with both previous research and what was expected. That being said, the novel proposal of overgeneralized autobiographical memory as a contributor to stress generation still represents a possible path by which depressive symptoms may develop and worsen in clinical populations. Further research into OGM and other contributing factors to stress generation is important to identify ways to improve daily functioning in depression and to prevent the exacerbation of symptoms over time. I would like to thank everyone who helped me with running this study and the entire year-long process. And that brings me to any questions.